Michigan, Georgia, college football playoff preview live right here. And I guess these two teams met in 1965. I'm kind of guessing that one wasn't quite as meaningful. All right, yes, here we go. I am bringing on some of the best that I could possibly find. We got Uncle Lou from YouTube fame, of course. Right next to me is Desmond Upshaw, who hosts our post game at the Voice of College Football on our Michigan channel and joins us every week. Justin Rowe with his analysis. You can catch his podcast, Blue by 90. And as I say this all the time when we have multiple teams on here and I bring on media from both sides, the best way for this to roll is for me to get out of the way. Everybody hears me yap way too much, so I will do just that. Uncle Lou, get us started on the Georgia side. And I believe you've heard the news at this point. Desmond just actually informed me when we first came on that JT Daniels has tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, good morning in that. I was going to make a joke about that at the very beginning about how Georgia can't catch a break. The wrong QB got COVID. But COVID's nothing to joke about. I don't want to make light of it, but but yeah, Stetson good to go though, I guess. Well, at least health wise. But no, I heard that today too. I hope JT's okay. I'll admit I started tuning some of the COVID stuff out over the last couple of months. It was just, without getting into any of it, it was just on and on and on. But now I'm turning the TV on today, and the NHL is canceled for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Something like 15% of the college basketball games this week have been canceled. Just all kinds of stuff going on. So I don't know. I hope JT's okay, and I hope, just like with injuries, I don't want anybody from Michigan to have to miss this game. I don't want anybody from Georgia. Same thing with Bama and Cincinnati. I mean, when you get to these big games, I don't want to beat half of Michigan. I'm sure Michigan doesn't want to beat half of Georgia. And besides that, you just, you want everybody to be okay. But yeah, I did hear the news. I don't think JT Daniels was going to play. I mean, barring an injury to Stetson Bennett, I don't think not having JT Daniels will impact the game.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was going to ask you that because right after Georgia lost, there was a lot of talk of, JT Daniels is a better quarterback, he should play, so on and so forth. And I've even seen just your channel, and especially the stream you had after the Georgia game, that you had mentioned that window had closed weeks ago as far as having, JT come in and replace Stetson. Because I think we can all agree that JT Daniels is the better quarterback, but for whatever reason, obviously it sounded like JT had an injury early on in the season. And then, once Stetson came in, it seemed like Kirby was just kind of just going to roll with him and move forward with him. So do you think there was any shot of JT potentially starting that game against Michigan?
No, I mean, when you end the season with Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech, you're going to win that game 100 and something to less than 20 total. I mean, those are just two. You knew there were going to be two blowouts. So you're saying to yourself, okay, they keep saying JT Daniels is rusty and blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, that sure would be a great opportunity to put him in or somebody in the second half of those two games. And, let's pretend Stetson Bennett was Bryce Young. Well, you still need a prepared backup. Somebody that's completed some passes recently, maybe. They didn't play at all against Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech. They put him in the second half. He played the entire third quarter and didn't attempt one pass. JT, they wouldn't even let him throw the ball. He handed the ball off 25 times and went and sat down, and they put Carson Beck in. So when we ended the season that way, I said, well, there's no plan to play JT, or else you would have used these last two basically preseason games that came at the end of the regular season. You'd have used those two games to prepare JT. And all the rumors, well, he's not 100%, or this whole fake made up argument between JT Daniels' family doctor and the team doctor. I don't buy any of that. This is people trying to make excuses for why Kirby Smart is playing Stetson Bennett. I think I don't believe any of that stuff. How you don't have a backup prepared, I don't know. I mean, I love Kirby to death. He's a great coach and an even better recruiter, obviously, but he's not perfect. And whatever you think about the Stetson versus JT argument and who's better, I don't see how anybody can look at Kirby Smart and go, yeah, he's done a great job handling quarterbacks since he's got to Georgia. Like, that's obviously something that he has fallen down on multiple times. And I think this year is another example, not just because JT Daniels isn't starting, but because we have no viable backup option at QB. And that's unacceptable when you've got 5 straight top 3 recruiting classes, 2 number 1 classes. You've signed more 5-star quarterbacks than any other team in America in the last 5 years. More than Ohio State, more than Oklahoma, more than Alabama, more than Clemson. Kirby's had more 5 stars than any of them. None of them have played. We're stuck with Fromm and Stetson Bennett. So anyway, I could talk for 2 hours about it, but we better move on before I get a little irritated here.
Well, I want to give a shout out to the badass Buckeye there. That's the first Buckeye fan I've seen rooting for Michigan to win this game out of anybody on social media. So props to you there. But I wanted to point this out. So Michigan, that defense is going up against another, you could call it QB controversy, when they went up against a QB controversy in Iowa as well. How many times has a team in 2 essentially championship games gone against a team with a QB controversy? I mean, Iowa had to put in their backup in second or third quarter there. So it's just interesting. And with, Michigan's defense, their strength this year has been getting to the quarterback. And I think that is a big, deal in this game. If Michigan can get to Stetson Bennett or whoever that QB is, that changes a lot of stuff for what Georgia can do. Now, I think Georgia's offensive line is going to be different than most everybody that they've gone against in the Big Ten. I mean, Iowa and Ohio State both have pretty solid offensive lines. But if Michigan can get to that quarterback, then all of a sudden Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels is now your offensive coordinator's thinking about things, you're second guessing things. It's just something that I think you're going to want to think about as everyone's preparing for this game.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can get hurt at any time. We all know that. You step on the field, any play could be your last. I just, you rotate 15 defensive linemen in and out of a game. We play 19 wide receivers that no one's ever heard of. We have 4 NFL tight ends that rotate in and out. But for some reason, we have no viable backup option at the quarterback position, and it doesn't even appear that they attempted to get one, to develop one. It's just strange. And yeah, well, Stetson's mobile. Yeah, I don't know where Georgia would have been this year without those 200 yards rushing and 1 touchdown from Stetson Bennett. 4 and 8 probably.
Lou, let me interject this one to play off of what Justin said, and I promise to back off and let you guys, but I would love to get your take on this. Again, to Justin's point, Michigan, basically Ohio State had the arrogance to say, we've got 2 NFL tackles and we can leave them on an island. They can block Hutchinson and Ajabo, which made no sense to me because they got 3 NFL wide receivers who are making all the catches. Their tight end's great. Jeremy Ruckert, Ohio State. He'll be playing in the NFL too, but he caught 1 pass for like 2 yards. Keep him in. Let him help. Those 3 wide receivers are doing enough damage. You got to protect those 2 tackles. I want to see if Georgia, I got to think Kirby Smart went to his offensive line coach and said, can our tackles really handle those guys? And if they can't, I'm leaning on you to tell me, are they better than Ohio State's tackles? Because those guys are pretty good, but they couldn't handle them.
Yeah. Will Anderson had 1 sack in the SEC title game. If Hutchinson has 1 sack, I'm, great. But Michigan, see, I get a lot of hate for this on my channel, but I think overall Michigan has a better defense than Alabama. Now, it's hard to say for sure because in college football, you play totally different schedules and all that. So right. you can't say, well, this team only gives up 300 yards and this team gives up 310. So the 300-yard team is better. Well, you don't really know that, but Michigan's higher ranked in almost every defensive category this year than Alabama. And obviously they got the 2 guys on the outside that are just unbelievable. So we'll see, but I don't know how much. Well, I can tell you this: Stetson Bennett's not dropping back to throw the ball 55 times like he did against Alabama. I mean, that was insane. Any argument you can make to play Stetson Bennett at QB does not involve him dropping back to throw 50-something times. I mean, if that was the plan, then it's even worse that you didn't play JT Daniels. I mean, that's just insane. I mean, we were beating these teams earlier in the year, and Stetson Bennett would be 14 of 19 for 210 yards and a couple of touchdowns. You send him out there, drop back 50-something times. He tipped at 49 passes, but by the time you account for the sacks and the times he took off scrambling, he dropped back 55 times in that game to throw the ball. Stetson did. That's insane. Won't be doing that against Michigan.
Obviously, he's not a guy that you want throwing that much, or that, and that's just not Georgia's game plan, right? They want to run the ball. So are you thinking the game plan should try to be pounded in between the tackles? Are you trying to do zone, a little zone stretch or something like that? What would you say the best game plan is against this defensive line and Michigan's pretty dang good defense?
I think in the first quarter, at least, Georgia's going to line up and just try to run right at them and see what they do. If Georgia's averaging 4 yards a carry at the end of the first quarter, and really, you could probably say the same thing for Michigan.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't expect McNamara to throw the ball 40 times. You're probably going to see 50 passes total in this game, maybe between both teams combined. I mean, whoever's able to run the ball, it just sounds cliche and old school, which is kind of weird. Georgia and Michigan both playing kind of old school football right now. Football from 10 years ago, pound the ball between the tackles, play action pass, a couple of QB scrambles here and there. But I think both teams are going to try to do the same thing, at least early. And, which defense can hold up, which offense maybe can break a big play early in the game. And maybe, I mean, that's what happened to Georgia against, we got behind 14 to a team that can score, every time they snap the ball, and Kirby panicked, threw the game plan out the window and started slinging the ball around the rest of the game. Neither team wants to do that here. So we'll see.
Yeah, I know as far as watching Georgia in the SEC championship game, you guys have a monster weapon. And I know George Pickens is a great athlete and Washington is a great athlete. But that tight end, I believe it's Brock Bowers, he was nobody in the Alabama linebackers, secondary could touch that guy. And he's a true freshman, right? Like,
yeah.
If I were Kirby Smart, obviously he's going to be run game number one, but I would be targeting number 19 quite a bit in that game because I mean, he's top notch. I've yet to see much like him at the tight end position, especially as a true freshman. He's incredible. That would be a huge part of the game plan, would be to get Bowers the ball early and often.
Yeah, I think so too. He's been probably our best and most consistent. Well, he's the leading receiver on the team as a tight end. In the SEC championship game, he was targeted 16 times. The wide receivers were targeted 17 times total. So they threw the ball to Brock almost as much as they threw it to every wide receiver combined, which I think that's a little too. You got to get the wide receivers the ball too, but Stetson kind of locked in on him. But for whatever reason, Georgia had a matchup advantage. I don't know what. I'm not an X's and O's guy. I'm just a fan. So I can't tell you what Bama was doing defensively or whatever. But obviously they were having a hard time finding a linebacker or a safety or anybody really that could man up on Bowers.
How do you find a guy that's 6'8" and can run a 4.5 40 to keep up with him, right?
Yeah, unreal. And I can consider myself pretty knowledgeable when it comes to Georgia and its roster and its recruiting and stuff like that. I had no clue who Brock Bowers was really until a week before the Clemson game, because you had the Eric Gilbert stuff went down and he was gone, and Darnell Washington got hurt in the preseason, and I was like, well, who's playing tight end? And I started seeing stuff pop up about this Brock Bowers kid, and I was like, great, relying on a true freshman playing Clemson, and I didn't know Clemson was going to be as bad as they were, but And yet, so it started right away in week 1. I mean, I don't remember how many catches he had against Clemson, but it was pretty obvious right away that Georgia had something with Brock Bowers.
Yeah,
And I'm trying to think, Des, I'm trying to think who Michigan's going to try and put on him. I know, we had Junior Colson on our podcast this week, and he's a freshman, but he's speedy. And Nikai Hill-Green is also young, but speedy as well. Whereas Josh Ross is the senior, but can't move.
That's not his,
not as well. So I'm thinking they try to put one of those young guys on him.
Honestly, I would think, because when I look at the Big Ten championship, Dax Hill played a lot of that, Viper, kind of the overhang outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it. It has multiple names in different systems, but I would imagine you probably want, because in a game like this, when it's win or go home, and the win gets you to the national championship, you just have to put best on best. And I think inside, because that's probably where Bowers is going to be, I would imagine you probably want Dax Hill there, because number one, the pass game matchup, but also two, that's most times, wherever Bowers lines up, that's probably going to be the running strength as well.
Right.
And
That's
Dax
true.
Hill is solid in run support as well. That would if just thinking about it just off the top of my head, I would imagine that's what the matchup would be. But I think one thing with Mike Macdonald, he's done a phenomenal job of adapting, of letting guys play free, kind of, run around and just use their athleticism. There's been so much talk about Aiden Hutchinson and how he's been able to be just unleashed and not been in that Rashawn Gary spot where, you're two gap reading and it's just go get the quarterback, man. Just go get him. And I mean, you look at it now and he's been one of the most dominant guys in college football and potentially a number 1 pick in the NFL draft. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think that's the cool part of when you get to high level football with, two teams ranked number 2 and 3 in the country at the end of the season. That's the cool part, is to see, are we going to be able to see, a 5-star kid in Dax Hill and also a 5-star kid in Bowers go head to head and see who's better. That's the cool part here.
Yeah. And you don't get to these games by accident. These are two great teams, two great coaching staffs. Harbaugh has had his fair share of detractors over the years, as has Kirby for some of the mistakes he's made. But these are two pretty high-level coaches and coaching staffs, obviously. And then you give them 30 days to prepare for a game. Michigan's not going to be surprised by Brock Bowers.
Right.
He's a freshman.
He's not flying under the radar.
Right. And if they didn't have this eye on him before the SEC championship game, then you can rest assured they've spent a significant amount of time thinking about what they're going to do to try to slow Brock Bowers down. And that's kind of the interesting chess match with these first round playoff games, because you get so much time to prepare, and it's not like a week 1 game, because you don't really know what your opponent is going to do in week 1. I mean, you can look at, the players they had coming back and whatever. But when you're talking about playoffs, I mean, generally speaking, teams are going to do what got them there. Michigan's not going to come out running 5 wide 80% of the time in this game. I mean, Michigan's going to do what Michigan's been doing all year long.
But I wanted to ask you, sorry to cut you off there. I wanted to ask you, Des, too. We watched Cade McNamara throw for 400 yards against MSU. Obviously, that was their only loss of the year. So, that's a little skid mark on their schedule. But when they have had to go to Cade McNamara to throw, it's not like he's unable to at all. They can get the ball to those guys, and they have talented wide receivers and talented tight ends. So do you think if that running game is not working, they're going to try and do what they did against MSU and start throwing all over the place?
Yeah, I agree. I think, to me, my thought with Cade, and I will raise my hand, and we've been on the podcast since week 1, and I was of the thought process and of the train of thought that against the Westerns and Northern Illinois of the world, I thought Michigan and Harbaugh and Gaddis were wasting reps. I thought Cade should have been throwing the ball more, kind of like what Uncle Lou was saying against, for Georgia against Georgia Tech and Charleston Southern, not throwing the football. Like I was of the thought that this was an ideal time when, like, same thing Uncle Lou said, when you're going to win by 100, throw the ball around. I thought,
I totally
trending
agree.
to that Wisconsin game, I thought Cade needed anywhere from 100 to 125 pass attempts just to get him comfortable to the point of, if that run game doesn't produce and is not effective, that you feel comfortable with what he can do. Now, I was wrong in that, in that thought process, because the credit I'll give to Jim Harbaugh, because I was critical of him earlier in the season, the credit I'll give him is they stuck to what they do, and they have just essentially just improved week after week. So it's been one of those things where, like you mentioned, like, no, Cade wasn't throwing it all around against, early on in the season, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, really even Wisconsin. He didn't throw it around a lot,
Even like where I was frustrated was, like, you get down to the stretch of the season, Indiana is at the, on the back end of the schedule, and they still just like ran the ball and got out of there with a 30-something to 7 win or something like that.
Yep.
I'm like, I wanted, at the time, obviously, I was like, why is Michigan not preparing for Ohio State and trying to score 50 points? Because we all thought that Michigan was going to have to score 50 to beat Ohio State, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. We've been proven wrong, essentially. They've gotten to this point. But I think that, the question more is, how quickly is Josh Gaddis going to adapt to if they can't move the ball on the ground? And more so, can Michigan throw the ball? Let's be honest. Michigan State's defensive secondary was literally 130th in the country this year. So Cade McNamara threw for 400 yards, but so did every other person on their schedule. Georgia is not just going to let him throw the ball all over, right? So I think it's, will they try? I'm sure that they will give it an attempt if they can't run the ball, but will they succeed is the better question there.
Yeah, you just got to keep, with the defense as talented as Georgia's, you got to keep them honest. Like, Georgia can't know, that they know they've got you stopped in the run, and
Right.
they are, Kirby can bring in all of the just different coverages and things like that. If those, guys on the back end, because they're extremely talented, they've got 4 stars, 5 stars just across the board. It's not a defense that you can be one-dimensional against and have success. So they are going to have to, if it's not establishing the run, you still have to commit to it, and I think of in the NFL when Brady was with the Patriots, and it wasn't always the run game was effective, that they were getting 4 or 5 yards of carry, but it was just that they continued the run attempts. Like, that's almost just as important. So I think as long as Michigan sticks with it and, is creative, I think they can have success, but it's not going to be easy. I think if you look at the Georgia Alabama game as just, the blueprint of, hey, just go out there and do what they did. I mean, you're talking about a Heisman Trophy winner, it would Bryce. Like, I mean, everyone doesn't have that, right? There's only one this year. So you're to try to copy and paste that blueprint, I don't think it's going to work. And for Michigan's sake, I don't think they're going to try to do that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they started off. Uncle Lou, I'll ask you with as far as Georgia's defense. I know, a guy that was as dominant, through the regular season as Jordan Davis was. Alabama did some tempo and some things that kind of to get him, I think, out of his normal groove, his normal rhythm. Like you mentioned, they have, I think 15 or 19 guys that they go on their D line, and they kind of did some tempo things to keep him on the field. What were your thoughts on just overall his performance? And I'm sure Georgia fans have piled on him, so I don't want to crush him, but just wanted to get your thoughts on, on his performance in the SEC championship.
It was a bad performance by a lot of people on the defense, but Jordan Davis in particular. And some of it, I think, is on him. Some of it maybe not. I mean, once Alabama starts going tempo and they're not substituting, Georgia can't substitute. And as much as I love Jordan Davis, and I was talking to some NFL guys the other day, in the NFL, he's a first down player, and that's it. I mean, he's not playing in the NFL on second or third downs. the way they throw the ball there. And at UGA, he's a first down guy. And, if it's 2nd and 6 or less, they leave him in, really. But there's a lot of times where Jordan Davis goes in, plays one play, and comes out. I mean, if it's 2nd and 10, he's coming out. If it's 3rd and 8, he's coming out. And they weren't able to do that against Alabama when Alabama went with that hurry up, the tempo offense. And clearly it wore him out. And maybe part of it, too, was, it's great when you win every week by 30 and 40 points and you're not having to sweat in the fourth quarter of a bunch of games. But a lot of these people ain't never played in the second half. I mean, not that they haven't played, but, it's very rare that a Georgia starting defense has had to play 4 quarters. Clemson, 1 or 2 other games, and that's it. The rest of Georgia's games were just blowouts. And so you had a lot of, freshmen and 3rd, 4th, 5th string guys in the second halves of games. And I think that showed against Alabama. The defense was wore out. You give credit to Alabama, for the tempo and deciding to do that. It obviously worked. And then Georgia's defense just played bad. I mean, you can't have blown coverages on the back end. I mean, if you get beat by Jamison Williams, fine. Okay. You got beat by one of the best receivers in college football. But how in the world is Jamison Williams running down the field on a 25-yard crossing route and there's nobody within 20 yards? How do you lose him?
Right.
Like,
you can lose a lot of guys, but not him.
Right.
Running back out of the backfield, but Mechie early, before he got injured, and
you have to
Williams.
Know. Okay, there he is. Let's figure that out first, and then let everything else. Not the post route he caught in the middle in double coverage. Great. There's nothing you can do about that. The guy, it was double coverage. The UGA guys were in position. They just got outran, and Bryce Young made a perfect throw 60 yards down the field, and he walked into the end zone. Okay, I don't like that, but you can live with that. But you see a guy running, there's nobody within 20 yards, and stuff like that hadn't happened all year. So do I think Alabama is whatever it is, 17 points better than Georgia? No, they were 17 points better 2 weeks ago. But is the Alabama offense terrible because they scored 10 points against Auburn in regulation, or did the Alabama offense have a bad day?
Yep.
Probably had a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for Georgia, their bad day came at the worst possible time against the best team we'd played. And Alabama gets a lot of credit for that. I'm not letting Georgia off the hook and saying, well, they just had a bad day. It's no big deal. If Georgia meets Alabama again, they got some serious work they're going to have. They can't perform the way they did the first time. The result will be the same or worse.
And I wanted to ask you too, just on your point of 99% of Georgia's games being blowouts, do you think, obviously there's the conditioning factor in there, but do you think there's just a bit of a shock factor too, when all of a sudden you're not dominating somebody and you're getting pushed around, or you get scored on and you find yourself, down in a game for the first time in a while?
Yeah. I mean, the end of the first quarter, Georgia's up 10-0. The kids are probably thinking, okay, we can handle this. It's like the line from Rocky IV or whatever, when Ivan Drago finally gets a cut on his eye or something. And because, Georgia just has this mental hurdle with Alabama they can't get over. But in that first quarter to beat them 10, I said, okay. But in the second quarter, it just fell apart. I mean, it just, they outscored us 24-0 or whatever it was. We had 3 straight 3-and-outs. They scored all 3 times. And before you know it, you're looking up to 24-10 or whatever it was, and 24-17 at halftime. And then in the second half, the interceptions came. It was very similar to last year's game. I mean, the score was exactly the same last year when we played Bama. Stetson played okay in the first half last year against Bama, and it fell apart in the second half. He had 3 interceptions last year in the second half. He had 2 this year, one of them being a pick 6. You can't do that. You're not going to win big games turning the ball over twice, and one of them's a pick 6. And in the second quarter, you can't. Talking about the defense being wore out, the offense, you go 3-and-out 3 times in a row, that taxes your defense. So, I agree the defense played bad, but some of that's on the offense for leaving them out on the field for the entire second quarter.
Yep. And Jordan Battle dropped an early, probably should have been another pick 6 early in that first half. And I'm like, oh man, like that was a close one. So it's definitely it's the complementary football, and like you mentioned, I think that's what both teams want to do in this game is play that complementary football. Lou, I'll ask you too. As far as Georgia, if you had to, guess as far as their mentality coming into the game, I would imagine they're either pissed off about, how they played against Bama. I don't think anybody was expecting that or wanted that to happen, or kind of like Justin said, do you feel like there's like kind of a shock, like we kind of got to pick it back up a little bit, like obviously it's still a huge game that you're getting ready to play next week. If you had to put your finger on it, like where do you think the Georgia players and coaches, their mentality is on this game next week?
Yeah, well, coaches are master motivators, and they'll use anything to try to motivate their kids and the team. So I'm hoping anyway it'll be a similar situation to the week between the Alabama's Auburn and Georgia game. Alabama looked horrible. They were lucky to escape that game with a win. Everybody wrote them off. Oh my God, they're terrible. And then they came out and played their best game of the season. So I'm hoping it's something similar to that. Because I think this is going to be a good game. There's been a lot of disappointing playoff games. For college football fans who aren't pulling for either Georgia or Michigan, I think you're going to get a good game here. Now, I've thought that before about some playoff games, and it didn't work out that way. What is it, Mark? 11 out of the 14 have been blowouts?
That sounds about right. 2014 Alabama Ohio State was a good one. The Oklahoma Georgia game, obviously, that one play-by-play, Lou. Great game, OT 2017. And then what would be the other one? Oh, the Clemson Ohio State game was a classic a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
outside of that, they've all been blowouts.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
A couple of goose eggs up there as well, right?
Yeah, Michigan State to
Clemson,
Ohio State. Yeah, 31 to nothing and 38 to nothing. Yeah.
Yep.
Crazy.
And of course, Alabama has beaten Oklahoma pretty bad a couple of times. I think LSU beat Oklahoma pretty bad. A lot of blowouts in these first round playoff games. And as much as I respect Cincinnati, but if you're trying to pick the blowout, it's probably going to be that game. I like Cincinnati. And look, Cincinnati's got a better secondary than Georgia. Cincinnati's got 3 NFL players in that secondary. And Desmond Ritter's a better quarterback than Stetson Bennett. Top to bottom, though, Georgia's better. But so, it's not that I don't think Cincinnati can compete. I do. But if you're trying to pinpoint, one of these two games that is more likely to be a blowout, I think it's that one.
Well, and I think too, the media companies and all that too agree with you, because Michigan Georgia has the prime time 7:30 game, and then that first round game I think is 2:30 or 3:30, pretty early on in the day. So I think the folks who schedule the games agree with you and think that this will be the better of the two games.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, obviously, I want Georgia to win. I don't hide that. I'm a Georgia fan, but as a college football fan, I want to see good games when these playoffs come around. And I think we'll get one. Georgia and Michigan, strength on strength. I mean, the offensive and defensive lines of these teams are both really, really good. Quarterbacks kind of fall into that game manager category type of deal, but I think it's going to be a good game.
So is this the deal with the two quarterbacks? You can pretty much throw them in a bucket, and they're the same guy, Cade McNamara, Stetson Bennett, except McNamara doesn't make mistakes. Stetson Bennett, you talked about Alabama last year. You talked about, Lou, the Alabama game this year. It seems like Stetson Bennett, you could take like 31 or 32 of his 35 pass attempts, and you're good with it. It's like 3 times in each one of, not just those games, anytime they play a quality opponent, seems like there's like 3 or 4 times he just makes he just completely misreads something, doesn't see one, tries to force a throw, and just brain freeze and does a stupid thing.
He's Brett Favre without the upside. Brett Favre never saw a covered receiver ever in his 20-year career. He never saw a receiver that was covered ever. And that's why he leads the NFL all time in interceptions, but he's got a few touchdowns too, and he scrambled around and did a lot of stuff outside of the pot, when stuff would break down. And Stetson's kind of that way too. But when Stetson has to throw the ball, that's the problem. You know, when we're running the ball effectively and he can play action on 1st and 10, he's a pretty good college quarterback. He's good enough. But when you need a quarterback to do something for you, that's where he really has a problem. When the other team knows he has to throw the ball, that's a problem.
One thing, though, I do want to talk about for Michigan is everyone talks about, yeah, they run the ball a lot, which they obviously do. But they also lead the country in plays of 40 yards or more, right? So they do have that explosive ability. And that, in my opinion, has been the major factor in why they've been able to get over the hump this year on the offensive side and score a bunch of points. So I think that, you know, yes, they're going to try and ground and pound with Haskins and Corum and Edwards, but they also are going to take their deep shots. You saw it in the Big Ten championship game. Gaddis wanted to come out firing, and they did. And so they've done it on the ground and on the and in the air too. So the reason I bring that up is I think people have a misconception because everyone talks about Michigan's run game that they don't have that explosiveness. But then also I look at, you know, how Alabama scored against Georgia in the SEC title game, and it was a 67-yard pass, a 55-yard pass, you know, obviously the interception return. So the way that Alabama scored on Georgia was not – sometimes they were grounding and pounding, but it was mostly trying to get big chunks in the you know, through the air. So if Michigan were to be able to do that, that could be it could be a shock factor for this Georgia defense as well, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the concern that Georgia fans have had about the defense going back to the spring, really, is the secondary. Very inexperienced. We lost something like 7 secondary players off of last year's team, either to transfer, graduation, or NFL. So you have some talent back there. Keely Ringo, 5-star kid, but he was injured all last year. So this year was his first year playing. You bring Darion Kendrick in from Clemson. He's done okay. Bring Tyke Smith in from West Virginia, #1 rated returning safety in all of college football. He what has he played? 15 snaps this year, out for the year. Mm-hmm. You know, now a lot of these teams we were playing during the season, they tried to exploit that secondary or test it some, but the front 7 was so dominating in the majority of those games, teams had a hard time doing it. I mean, it's hard to run a 40-yard route when the quarterback doesn't have time to breathe, you know. And Alabama figured it out. But we saw you know, South Carolina hit some big plays on Georgia with that Josh Fan that they have. Tennessee obviously hit a couple of big ones on us. So that's been kind of the not even a secret, really. Like, you know, Georgia's secondary, can it hold up? And that's why for a long time, especially the last kind of half of the season, I thought Ohio State would be Georgia's biggest roadblock to a national title. They ran the ball great with Travion Henderson. Obviously, C.J. Stroud and all those wide receivers. I was like, this could be a problem here. You know, if we ended up having to play them. Alabama wasn't looking great for a lot of the time during the season, and that was the concern. And it showed in that game against Alabama. They were able to hit Georgia on some big ones. And I didn't know that about Michigan. One of Kirby Smart's press conferences, which are a total waste of time, by the way, generally speaking. He mentioned that. So someone asked him about something about Michigan or something, and he mentioned that Michigan led the country in plays of 40 yards or more, or whatever it was. And that kind of shows you how sometimes perception and reality don't really match up. I mean, I think people look at Michigan and they kind of in their mind, they look at them as a certain type of team. You know, I don't even think we've said the words Hassan Haskins since the show started, but that's what people think, really. They think about Michigan. You know, Haskins are going to run the ball 40 times. About Cade McNamara doesn't throw a lot. Yeah. And then you see that stat, and you're like, oh, okay, well,
Well, half of them have been the running backs doing it, so that is some part of it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
still, yes, they do have that ability in the air too, to your point.
He's really good. And it's like we were talking about earlier. When you have a Hassan Haskins, when you've got a James Cook, a Zamir White, when you've got these running backs and they're successful, then quarterbacks like Cade and Stetson can have success because you can catch the other team's defense napping on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 2. You know, if you run the ball and get 8 yards on 1st down and it's 2nd and 2, why not throw the ball 40 yards downfield? You're pretty confident you're going to pick up that 2 yards on 3rd down if you don't get it on if you don't hit the bomb on 2nd down. And teams like Georgia and quarterbacks like Stetson and Cade, they're able to catch some teams that way. You know, it's not a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud situation necessarily where they're going to be throwing the ball 45 and 50 times and there's nothing you can do to stop it. They're, Georgia and Michigan, not really that way. They have to be able to run the ball.
I wanted to ask you too. There was some talk, and I wanted to hear from your perspective. There's some talk after Georgia loses that game to Alabama. Well, their division isn't really that good. Maybe the teams that they beat up on all year aren't that good. Is this team really at that number 2, number 3 level? Is there any validity to that, or do you think it's that's just people overreacting to one game?
Well, I mean, Georgia played some bad teams. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Vandy is horrible. South Carolina is horrible. But they played some okay teams. I mean, Auburn had a down year. They're not a terrible team. I mean, they almost beat Penn State on the road at night. Penn State, they almost beat Alabama. Georgia embarrassed them. Kentucky, Arkansas, Florida. I mean, these are all blowouts. And I hear that a lot, and then I turn around and see Ohio State man bragging about a miracle win over Nebraska. And, and I'm like, well, what do you want? What do you want Georgia to beat Arkansas by 6, or do you want us to beat Arkansas 37-0 and they can't even cross midfield? I mean, what do you, if you play a bad team, all you can do is blow them out.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't put I don't put a lot. I don't put a lot into that. Well, their schedule wasn't that tough. That's why they lost to Alabama. No, I think Georgia's one of the best 4 teams.
If you believe in the football power index, which I don't, but I still have it right here, so that makes no sense, I know, but I just cited it just to kind of back up what I think of Georgia's schedule, which there are very, very few teams in the country that are beating teams that only have like 1 loss. So we hear this all the time. Who have they beaten? Who have they beaten? Who have they beaten? Well, if you're looking for the teams that have beaten teams like Alabama and Georgia and those teams don't exist because those teams aren't losing games. So you got to go to at least like a lot of 10-2 and 9-3 teams at best that are losing games. So Georgia was good enough. I tell you, Arkansas turned around after they got obliterated by Georgia, obliterated. And if you've watched Arkansas football this year, they're a good football team. They beat Texas A&M. The next week after the Georgia game, they went and hung 51 on Ole Miss, and everybody thought Ole Miss had a terrible defense. It turned out this season they really didn't. They've gotten a lot better on defense. Tennessee was running up ridiculous yardage totals and point totals on everybody. They hit Georgia with a touchdown in the first drive. Then after that, forget it. Clemson, we can make fun of Clemson, say they're not Clemson anymore. Yeah, they had a 9-3 season. They're really not that good, but they knocked out Clemson. Clemson went 9-2 the rest of the way. Clemson's still a pretty talented team, and I'm going to guarantee that they're still one of really the 15 best teams in the country. So Kentucky's a 9-3 football team. They're good.
And then you talking about beating 1-loss team or whatever it is. Okay. How many 1-loss teams do you have to beat before you've played a good schedule and you ain't played nobody? Because Cincinnati gets crapped on constantly. They beat Notre Dame by 2 touchdowns on the road in South Bend. And what's Notre Dame's record?
11-1.
11-1. That's a 1-loss team. And Cincinnati gets no respect because the next week they played, whoever they played. So how many do you have? Look, you can't play a 1-loss team every single week. in October, there aren't very many one-loss teams left. To
Right.
play. The other thing
Exactly.
is, when you're ranked in the top 5, who can you play?
Yeah.
You don't get a lot of top 5 matchups in the regular season. I mean, you get every once in a while you get Michigan and Ohio State both really good at the same time. Georgia, Florida, both really good at the same time. Auburn, Alabama, both really good, whatever. But usually in October and November, you got a really good team playing a team with 3 or 4 losses. I mean, it's hard to win all your games.
It's true.
Exactly.
It's true. I had one question too for Dez. It was in the comments here talking about JJ McCarthy being the X factor. How much, I think Josh Gaddis has really surprisingly done a phenomenal job with Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy. Obviously, he won Coordinator of the Year, the Broyles Award, for a reason. He's done a fantastic job with the offense as a whole, but not often do you play 2 quarterbacks to the extent that they do, and it works as well as they have. Both quarterbacks have truly made a good impact on this offense. How much do you see JJ playing in this game, or even just making an impact at all?
Yeah, I think if I had to call it, I'd say JJ's probably going to have about 10 snaps in this game. When you think about the 2 quarterback system, I think the easiest one to go back to is the Tim Tebow and Chris Leak situation at Florida. And the interesting part is these 2 guys, I would say, are much closer in athleticism than those 2 were. Like Chris Leak was a prototypical pocket passer, and we all know what Tim Tebow was. I mean, 20 touchdown passes, 20 rushing touchdowns. So it was, really, I mean, he was essentially a running back who could throw the ball. And these guys, with Cade and JJ, for me and in my thought, they're not that different athletically. Like, yes, JJ's definitely has more athleticism, more juice, but it's not as if Cade is Peyton Manning, back there. He can move, right? Like, so it's unique, and I say that to give Josh Gaddis more credit because number one, I was someone who was also critical of him last year. I thought he did not do a great job of just this offense. It just was disjointed. So to come in and have both of these guys playing well, it's a credit to him. I think that award that he won it was more than deserving. And I would say that probably the next best guy to get that award probably is still on the Michigan staff with Mike McDonald. I mean, he did a terrific job as far as taking over for the defense. But yeah, if I had to call it, I would say JJ's probably going to have like 10 snaps in this game. Probably going to be more in the red zone, where he's been just really dangerous. I think that, having that option of having him, kind of the run pass option out on the bootlegs and, kind of rolling out of the pocket. We saw him again, against Michigan State with the throw to Andrew Anthony. We've seen him do those types of things, but I think it's probably going to be around 10. For me, I've been a big, I've wanted it to be more so of if JJ's going to come in, have him come in for a drive. And I
agree with that.
Basically all of the things that I've recommended for the offense have been wrong. So I'll say that that has been my thought process is, hey, if we're going to bring JJ in, have Cade go, 2 or 3 drives and then bring JJ in for a drive versus having exactly having Cade come in for 2 plays, JJ come in for 1, or, had Cade for first down, JJ for second down, and then we're in 3rd and long and we got to throw it. So let's bring Cade back in. Like, I think it could be done better, but I mean, it's been effective. So, like I said, that I'll take the loss on that too, but that would be my thought as far as, the JJ dynamic and how that'll play out, next week in the game.
Well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned the red zone there, and I think the red zone is going to be one of the most important parts of this game for both teams. The reason why Michigan won 90% of its games down the stretch was because they were able to get 7 points in the red zone. They weren't doing that in the beginning of the year, and thankfully at that time they weren't playing good teams, so they didn't have to, they were able to kick field goals and still win games. But if Michigan can't get in the end zone, it's going to be a struggle for them. And I think, I want to hear from Lou too on his thoughts about Georgia trying to get into the end zone as well, because I think both teams are kind of in the same boat there with, hey, if you're going to ground and pound, are you actually going to, on 3rd and 7 when you're on the 18-yard line, what are you going to do? Are you going to throw it, or are you going to try and run it and hopefully get that 7 or settle for a field goal?
Well, I think Kirby's pretty conservative. So
we already know the answer.
3rd and 8, I would almost rather. I used to get mad when teams would run the ball on 3rd and 8, give up play or something, or 3rd and 11, and you see them, they run a draw. I used to get so mad. Now with Stetson Bennett, if it's like 3rd and 8 or longer, I'm like, okay, maybe if we run the ball, we'll get it. If not, we punt, play good defense, or if we're in field goal range, I'll take the 3. I don't like Stetson Bennett throwing the ball when he has to. And you can cherry pick stats on anything you want. His 3rd down numbers are horrendous. They're terrible. Whatever you want to look at, efficiency, completion percent, whatever. His 3rd down numbers are horrible.
Well, that'll be very interesting then, because the one, or that's another factor that Michigan's defense has been really good at getting off the field for the most part. The only time they struggled this year was against Michigan State, when they couldn't get off the field on 3rd and 4th down. Michigan State converted like 4 4th downs in a row on one drive, and that was one of the daggers for Michigan. So it's really interesting, because there's a lot of strengths on strengths, but there's also some weaknesses and strengths in this game, and it's just going to be. I agree with what you said, Lou, in the beginning. The whole 30-day, mind games and all that stuff is going to be really, really interesting to see who comes up with what game plan for this one.
So when it comes to the players on these two teams, I think you go to Michigan, you go to Georgia because you're a top shelf player to win championships, to prepare yourself for the NFL, all that. But if you look at what's been achieved by these coaching staffs, Jim Harbaugh slayed the dragon, beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten. Nobody thought he was going to do that this year. People were talking 7-5, whatever, and Ohio State can't be beaten, but he did it. Georgia's been sitting, Lou, as a top 4 program in the country with Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson for like 5 years now, got to the championship game, lost in excruciating fashion. I don't need to remind you. So is Harbaugh playing with house money, or does he even look at it that way, versus Kirby Smart thinking, not necessarily processing it this way, like I got to call games to win a national championship because people expect that, but no, not being a dumb guy, he knows what the expectations are. We are supposed to win the national championship, versus Michigan not just being happy to be here. They're high-level players and coaches, but they're just being a different expectation level here.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much that affects the coaches or the players. I definitely think fans look at it that way, and not even fans of Georgia or Michigan, just college football fans in general. I think the more embarrassing outcome would be for Georgia to lose than for Michigan to lose. If Michigan loses, Jim Harbaugh still made the playoffs, first time Michigan's done that, still won the division, first time Harbaugh's done that, beat Ohio State, first time Harbaugh's done that, won the Big Ten. You said it. Harbaugh got a lot of those monkeys off his back. Kirby did not. Kirby lost the SEC title game for the 3rd time in 4 years, or whatever it is now. Didn't beat, lost to Alabama again. Blew a lead to Alabama again. 4 straight losses to Alabama, 4 leads Georgia had in those games. At least we weren't winning at halftime this time, only after the first quarter. So I think fans will look at it that way. Like, I think if Georgia loses, the internet will be harder on that than if Michigan loses.
Yep.
Definitely agree there. I think that after Jim Harbaugh beat Ohio State and then won the Big Ten, this is all gravy from a fan's perspective, from the media's perspective. I think as long as they don't go out and get blanked or something like that, then it's going to be, wow, look at what Jim Harbaugh did, with this team, the turnaround. That's going to be still the narrative for sure. I wonder, I agree with you, Lou. I highly doubt that a lot of people are thinking of it that way, but there's always something in the back of people's minds thinking, can we really do this? If you're Georgia and you're like, I wonder what's their mentality after that Alabama game. Is it like, dang, we really just can't get over this hump? Or is it like, we're pissed off as much as possible, we got to go, we want Bama one more time, type of thing? And then for Michigan, is it like, we're here, we're not stopping now? I mean, it took us 20 years to get to this spot. Let's go get it. I think
that and Michigan, I think, it has been the best team in America for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Alabama struggled down the stretch until the SEC championship game, but Georgia blew it in the SEC championship game. Cincinnati sleptwalked through the majority of its season. Michigan had its toughest games in November, won them, beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten, all that. I think Michigan's the hottest team heading into the playoffs. They've been the best consistently good team from November to now.
Most Michigan fans wish we played the week after the Big Ten championship, right?
Right.
It's like, let's keep this thing rolling. Georgia's down. They all that stuff. I feel like there's almost been this lull, and people are. I'm certainly concerned. Can Michigan pick up that momentum again? It's like with how hot they were. Obviously they peaked at the right time at the end of the year, but then it's 30 days. It feels like an eternity, until you get back on that field. Whereas if they were to play the next week, it's like, just keep it rolling.
Yeah. And without getting into a 20-minute playoff expansion thing, unless you want to, it sure would be great to see. I don't know who's ranked 12th in the final poll, Mark, and who was ranked 5th.
I think
it sure would be great to see that game today.
Was it MSU?
We'd have Michigan State, Notre Dame.
Yeah, so no offense,
nice little matchup.
Kent State Golden Flashes. That was great that they played today, but it would have been nice to have Michigan State versus Notre Dame today, and then 11 versus 6, and all that kind of. I don't like this 30 days deal either. But anyway, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, what college football fan, if you read off 5 versus 12, 6, 11, 7, 10, 8, 9, would not be like, give me that.
Give me all. Right. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Have that for the 2 weeks heading up to Christmas instead of. I mean, you can still do these other bowl games. I like the bowl games, and I watched the majority of them. I took my kids to see the new Spider-Man movie today, so I did miss the Kent State game. But
the famous Idaho Potato Bowl.
Yeah,
come on.
I know, but they wanted to go see that Spider-Man, so I had to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd much rather be watching, top 15 playoff games.
Totally.
For these 2 weeks,
and they get their own slot, instead of every single decent team playing within 3 days of New Year's,
Yeah. It's coming.
Yeah. It is. So, Lou, as far as, for Michigan, their defense, it's been all about, Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. How do you think Georgia's going to approach as far as, in those passing downs, that protection? Do you think they're going to go 5-man? You think they're going to max protect? Like, how do you think they're going to approach handling those defensive ends? Because, I mean, that's been the Achilles heel of essentially any team who's played Michigan has been those two, guys who are just consistently applying pressure. How do you think Georgia's going to approach that?
Yeah, I think that's the best outside combination Georgia has played. Will Anderson is amazing. There's no doubt about it. But there's nobody on the other side nearly as good as the two Michigan guys. So and like I mentioned earlier, Will Anderson had the 1 sack. Now with Michigan, you can't just say, okay, where's Will Anderson? Okay, let's block him because there's one on each end. You have to account for both of them. You can't double team both of them. So Georgia's done a good job this year protecting Stetson. He's only been sacked 7 or 8 times all year, and he's mobile too. He moves around the pocket well, so that helps too. I think Georgia will do okay. But I'm not going to be surprised if Aiden Hutchinson has 3 tackles for loss and a sack. I mean, that's not going to surprise me. I mean, that dude's he's probably the most dominant player I've seen on the front like that since Chase Young at Ohio State. I mean, that guy was unbelievable. And the thing about Chase Young, he did it when it mattered. It seemed like every time Ohio State needed a sack on 3rd down, he got one. It was unbelievable. And Aiden Hutchinson reminds me of that. I mean, he's fun to watch. He's fun to watch. You're not going to just take him out of the game. I mean, he's going to have an impact on the game. Well,
that was what I was just going to say too. Is even if he doesn't get sacks, he has an impact on essentially every play that he's in. Which is what makes him that much more valuable. He's not just that one type of a player. So, Michigan has been able to stop the run against. I mean, they stopped the run against Ohio State. Ohio State couldn't run at all against them. Iowa couldn't run at all against them. So that's where I'm going to be interested to see if Georgia lines up in that first quarter and just says, "Hey, we're going to run it down your throat." Michigan, I think, is going to give them a run for their money.
And apparently, if you ask Desmond Howard, Georgia should probably recruit Kenny Pickett to put between Aiden Hutchinson and Stetson Bennett.
Oh boy! Des did not make any friends. That he made a lot of
with
new
me. He didn't.
No Ohio State friends. I know he doesn't have many Ohio.
It had nothing to do with me being an Ohio State guy. Wink, wink. But it really didn't.
It was definitely a media guy crossing the line over to his alma mater / fandom a little too much on a Heisman ESPN show.
Tebow did start it.
Tebow did start.
He did get it started.
Let's blame him.
Yeah. There you go.
Let's honor the super chat real quick here if I can read this. We got so just FYI to all Georgia fans, you're gonna have to rely on Bennett because it just caught, JT Daniels just caught COVID. So good luck, Georgia, and go Blue. See y'all in Miami. Des got.
I'm assuming it's tickets for you.
Ooh, hey,
there you go.
Maybe
there you are.
Sounds good. Well,
I'll be in Miami. I'll see you there.
That'll be interesting. I in my as far as work goes, I have a customer who lives in Chicago now, and his parents live in Ann Arbor, and he used to come back like every Saturday, but he's like, I wasn't able to get back as much as I, with work and stuff. He's like, I wasn't able to get back that much this fall, but he's actually going down to Miami. So I can't imagine that atmosphere. I think it's going to be incredible. I know Michigan fans will be there in droves. It's gonna be pretty cool. So I am looking forward to seeing the maize and blue next week, and it'll be interesting. I think this will probably, as far as bowl games go, and obviously the result of it is it weighs a lot more into it. But I agree with Uncle Lou. I think this is going to be the best game. Really, even I think this game will be better than even the national championship will be, because I just think these teams are evenly matched as far as their philosophy, what they want to do, talent level. I think everything. I think even coaching staff. I think both of these coaching staffs are incredibly high level and have just shown, week in and week out that they are, elite. And I think it's going to be just one of those heavyweight fights. It'll be a good one to watch.
Des, I think you're a little out of bounds here, not recognizing that Texas, San Antonio, and San Diego State are playing right now. You don't know what's going on in that game.
Aren't
that is true? I don't.
Those are two, or no, one of them.
San Diego State
might have.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's
what?
Brady
That's 3
Hope,
losses
right?
within.
Yeah, those are 2 pretty good teams.
I only need to hear one other thing out of both Justin and Uncle Lou, and that's you both root for storied programs. The status is through the roof, but you've never experienced a national championship. Or Justin, trying to put the age together with the years, you were extremely.
I was 5. I was
Okay,
5.
you were
when
5. I don't know how much you were into. I certainly didn't know what was going on in college football when I was 5.
I'm sure I was wearing maize and blue, but didn't really know what was going on.
Okay. We're going to not count that.
Yeah.
So, Uncle Lou, have you thought about it? Because, again, you got to bring up 2017, or maybe I shouldn't, but thought about what that moment is going to feel like when that trophy gets hoisted and you know your team has done it.
Yeah, I wish we would have won it in 2017. Well, obviously I do, but that 2017 was kind of like this year for Michigan. Like there was no preseason expectations for Georgia to win a natty or even to make the playoffs or anything in 2017. And yes, I would love to be Alabama and wake up every January to playoff games and not have to worry about it. That would be great. But short of that, though, these magical seasons don't come around very often for a lot of teams, Georgia included. Georgia's expectations have been raised since 2017. It would have been to win it in 2017 would have been amazing. And it'll be great to win it this year or next year or any year. I mean, I'm not a total delusional idiot. Like I know Georgia's not Alabama. You know, I don't go into every single offseason thinking Georgia's winning the national championship. And the last couple of years, Georgia has been playing meaningful games in November and December with a chance to make the playoffs. And I'm going to be honest, that makes me happy. Now, I want a national title, but I'm not so jaded that it's like, well, if we don't win the national title, it's a waste of a season or anything. I mean, there's 126 teams who would trade places with Georgia right now or Michigan, you know, because they're not playing in a playoff. Georgia and Michigan are. I don't know what I would do if Georgia ever. It would probably. I mean, I have no idea. It would depend on how it happened. I mean, 2017 overtime, that whole thing. I would have lost my mind. I'm sure had Georgia won that one. You know, but a lot of these national title games haven't been close either. So, what would I do at the end of a game if Georgia was up 30-10 at halftime and ended up winning 45-17? I don't know. I mean, you've been celebrating for 3 hours at that point. I don't know what I would do when the game was over.
You'd probably be pretty hoarse on the on your stream. I'm not sure you'd be able to do one. You'd probably need the next day to get the voice back right.
Well,
just one, Mark.
Yeah. Well, for me, so I got engaged a year ago last weekend. I'm getting married next summer. My fiance is in the other room listening to this, so I'm probably going to be sleeping on the couch. No doubt, Michigan winning the national title would be the best day of my life. Absolutely, no doubt. The Michigan Ohio State game this year might have already taken the cake. It was an unbelievable day. I was in Ann Arbor. It was just at the game. It was unreal. And then to be in Indy the next week and now going to Miami. So I've been there every step of the way. It would be so satisfying for a lot of the reasons why Lou is talking about 2017 Georgia, what that would have been. For everybody to have counted Michigan out, counted Jim Harbaugh out. It's been 7 years. All these things for the buildup through his entire tenure, through the buildup before that, through Brady Hoke and Rich Rod. I mean, listen, there are so many Michigan fans out there that have been through the shit, like just really bad stuff, right? And thinking about not only just bad football under Hoke and Rich Rod, but then the heartbreak of 2016 Ohio State, of even this year Michigan State, of the fumbled punt against Michigan State. Like there's been so many times where Michigan has been right there and then just it hasn't happened. So for me and for so many Michigan fans out there, it would just be so satisfying for Jim Harbaugh and this team, because this team is also so lovable and likable. Aiden Hutchinson, how do you not love the guy? I mean, Hassan Haskins, Cade McNamara, it's just like every single guy on this team seems to be a really solid kid, and they love Michigan and all that stuff. So for all those reasons, it would be so sweet for Michigan to hoist that trophy.
Des, we'll leave your fandom to the side because you're smirking all the way. Yeah. When Uncle Lou said something about these Alabama fans who every January are in the playoff, yeah, whatever. So this is not your night.
True. I agree. I agree. And
you've done a phenomenal job of co-hosting and asking questions. Great job.
For sure. For sure. Go ahead, Mark.
This has been great. You guys have been amazing. So first and foremost, yes, Desmond, thank you so much. Desmond joins me each and every Wednesday along with Dre Artis on our Michigan Live show on our Michigan channel. So check him out. Check out what they do, providing Michigan post game right here at the Voice of College Football. Justin, we usually get him for a segment each and every week. You can catch Justin, as it says there on the banner, Blue by 90 podcast. Justin, we appreciate you being here, taking the time for us. I always have a great time talking college football with you. And the incomparable Uncle Lou, catch him right here. If I got to thank everybody I'm talking to right now, everybody listening to my voice knows Uncle Lou. But if you don't, all you got to do is search it right here on YouTube, Uncle Lou, and you will have a blast. I guarantee it. Uncle Lou, thanks for making the time, man. I know you got a lot of stuff going, so thanks for being here.
Oh yeah, I always like coming on, Mark, and I enjoyed talking to you two guys too. It was nice to get to know y'all a little bit and talk to you for a while. And just remember, when you see the Uncle Lou videos over the next 10 days, it's just trash talk. It's not personal.
All right. Sounds
great
good.
stuff. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Merry Christmas to all three of you. Happy holidays. Enjoy it this weekend with friends and family.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Yes. Merry Christmas, guys.
Happy holidays.